House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
It is Tuesday, so that means we are going to talk about all things real estate and the wonderful, lucrative, and somewhat challenging world of real estate on Guam. I'm Jason Salas, and Gina Campos and Liz Duenas are joining me from Remax Diamond Realty Guam. Hafa ladies.
Hafa.
All right, and of course, a topic we brought up a couple weeks ago was surveyors. Are there enough of them? How busy are they? What exactly goes into it with the pandemic, with the economy being what it is? And ladies, we have a very prominent surveyor with us today.
Yes, that's right. He's well in demand, right, Dennis?
Yes.
Dennis Belocta Survey.
All right, Dennis, thank you so much for joining us and everything. So maybe if you can maybe just give us a little bit of context and everything like that. What is the, let's call it the operational tempo these days of the surveying market on Guam?
Well, right now there's a lot of demand for surveying services with the military buildup. There's also a kind of double whammy in effect with the fact that there's not as much land surveyors available on island, not just professional, but also support staff. There's just not a lot of them running around. So you kind of have these two forces kind of combining. And I think, of course, land work regarding land, real estate, sales, leasing, anything construction, that's always been in high demand on Guam. There's never been truly enough. And as the years will go on, there will be less surveyors because a lot of them are older and they're kind of aging. A lot of them are over the age of 60 already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a problem that will get worse. And ever since I took over my father's business, each year has gotten progressively busier, and that was in 2012. So I've just noticed that it's been getting busier and busier, and there are less people who are working in the profession. There's not as much trained people running around too. So that's kind of the market for surveying right now. There's just high demand, low supply, and we try to do the best we can, but it ultimately comes down to that. So there's not enough time in the day.
Well, business is booming for you, probably for better and worse. And ladies, I would say, as it filters down to your level as realtors and everything like that, this can only delay the process where you can actually provide like some sort of turnaround to your clients who are trying to get like a property assessed or surveyed. Would that be right?
That's right. Go ahead, Gina.
Well, and it's, Dennis is explaining to us, Jace, about what the issues are on the private side, on this from the private sector, the surveyors on the private sector. But we have an even more challenging issue on the government side. So he's telling us what the problems are in terms of the high demand for surveyors in the private sector. But then all of his work ends up on some government, on the government agency's desk. And there's a huge bottleneck there as well. So, and we're not even going to touch that today because, it's difficult to talk about what's going on in there. But yeah, that's one side of the problem is on the private sector, very big demand. On the public government sector, there's a huge bottleneck there. Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, so, if Dennis is subdividing property, as Gina put it, it does have to go to the government. Nothing happens unless the government approves it. And then if there's any corrections or changes they want made, it goes back to Dennis. And then from Dennis, it goes back to the government. And if they don't approve it, it could sit on their desk for a number of months until such time that they do approve it. However, for Dennis, we need him when we're selling property and the sellers have to hire him to mark the boundary points because the transaction will not move forward until such time the buyers look at the boundary points and the surveyor shows them and also provides them with either an as-built map, which an as-built map actually reflects the boundary points of the property and how the house sits in relationship to the lots. But I think, and those are critical items, but we'd like Dennis to explain some of the problems sometimes he encounters when he does his survey, because without his services, the transaction cannot move forward.
Well, part of the issue is that, of course, survey boundaries are missing and people don't know where they are. So what I usually tell people is that when I do a survey and I show the property corners, I tell them to take pictures and I try to go out of my way to mark them so that they can be found later on. And that's kind of what I rely on a lot. If people know exactly where the property corners are, they take pictures of it and can remember where they are. A lot of times, as long as they have the sketch, it's really easy to do the survey from then on. Um, and so it's really important to kind of communicate that to new property owners. Um, I also tell them that if if you buy a property and there's no fence, go ahead and build a fence once you know the property corners are there. So that alleviates a lot of the issues that I think you guys will see because it'll be easier to find the
Now,
property
Dennis, when you say,
corners.
I'm sorry, when you say sketch, are we talking about like professional, like, blueprints, something an architect has put together, or maybe like, like an engineering firm, land management perhaps, or can it even be something as maybe legally binding, but something as simple as someone kind of like outlining what the property and the elevation levels are
Well,
topographically?
well, I call it a sketch, but technically it's a survey report, which is
Mhm.
what we supply on all realtors. It's not necessarily something that goes to the government. Um, we don't really record it, but at the same time, we do try to do that for every survey that we do, so that we have a record of it and say, okay, this property corner existed in 2021, and we took a picture of it. Therefore, it should be easy to kind of reestablish from then on.
You,
When
you,
you what
you know,
it, in terms of well, I just want to make this point also is that in terms of all the issues with land management and stuff like that, they also have difficulty staffing. They don't have really enough staff because they're kind of facing the same forces we are. They're trying to train their staff. They don't have enough staff to do all the map checking that they need to do. Um, that goes for planning and for survey division because they also have to do their other. They're also asked to do surveying for the government. So it's not just a matter of they have a lot of map checkers and then they're being slow. They do have to. They do need an. I think there are only like 3 or 4 map checkers in Department of Land Management. So in on the survey division side, and I think there's less on the planning side. So they have a long they have a long backlog of that.
Mhm.
So it used to be I told people that it would take about 3 to 6 months to do a simple parceling survey, and now I've been telling them it's going to take about 6 months to a year.
Mm.
So um,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Gina.
Jay, so, we were talking about the sketch. So when a licensed surveyor marks the boundaries of your property, the sketch is his certification that he did it and he reviewed the numbers that they used to put those pins down. And the other thing that the community needs to be aware of is once Dennis sets, or any surveyor, once any registered surveyor puts their pins on the ground or finds a pin and flags it and says, hey, yeah, I'm certifying that this is correct, you're not supposed to touch it. You're not supposed to pick it up, clear your lot, and put it back down. Your neighbor shouldn't move it to where they think it's
Yeah, that's
appropriate.
certified, verified, validated. Like,
Mhm.
Law says you can't touch their markers.
Mhm.
And I very recently had a situation where my son is in the process of building his home, and the government of Guam put in an easement. It was DPW, I'm sure. Yeah, it was DPW. They put in an easement for a neighboring lot. And when the government puts in the easement, I mean, I certainly hope that they mark the points when they put in these roads, but in this case, I know they did not, because once they put in the road, we realized early on that the road was going through a portion of our property. And I actually, Dennis marked the survey points for me before my son started to build. So that became an issue. That was an issue that came up because when my son started to clear so that he could build, of course, the adjacent lot owner said, "You guys are messing up my road. This is," I mean, it became a controversy. He disagreed with where our survey points were, which was part of his road. And Dennis was kind enough to come out there. And these are the issues that surveyors have to deal with all the time, right, Dennis? I mean, you came out there and I don't know how long you met with the gentleman. But not only did Dennis have to justify to us where our points were, he also ended up having to talk to the neighbor and explain to him that, yeah, maybe you need to mark it because the government did not mark this easement. And, we have the right to clear our property. And that's just some of the things he had to deal with.
Well, I
Right.
wonder,
Most,
sometimes the government hires vendors and maybe the vendors didn't confirm where those points are. And as a result, created the problem, right?
well, a lot of times the government does not necessarily look for the property boundaries. Even I hear stories about stuff like GWA. They'll knock out survey points because they're doing the construction, stuff like that. GPA, they'll put power poles. They generally put power poles away from the property corners, but sometimes they'll knock it out, right? But it's not like they go look for it. So that happens quite often. Um,
Mhm.
and in the case of that property where he was kind of, well, he didn't have an awareness of exactly where the property corners were. And so that's what I try to tell people. Here are exactly where your property corners are. Here is what you need to know about access for your property and all that. And these are the questions that the survey report answers. I sometimes I get a request to do a survey on a sloped property in the jungle. So what I'll do is that I'll make sure that the client knows that there's a slope on the property. There's like, because in case they want to subdivide it, how do they subdivide it? How do they get access to it? And these are questions that they ask. So that those are all the issues that I usually have to deal with and the questions that I usually have to answer. And you know, you can see all the things that we cover in terms of the question of property and ownership and how to use the property. Can it be subdivided? What is the title that I should be holding onto? And these are all the issues that we had to answer before. We didn't have to answer that many questions about it, but nowadays we do. People have a lot of questions. They want to make sure that they're okay buying the property, and they want to make sure that they're not throwing their money away, as has happened in a few cases where a client came up to me and asked me to survey a property, and basically the description of the property was kind of junk. It could not be surveyed, and I had to tell him, "Look, we can't survey this because the description is so bad." So a
Yeah.
lot of times, I do recommend that property owners do come in and talk to me. I know I'm fairly busy, but if they come in and talk to me or email me, I'll generally try to answer their questions because I don't like I don't like property owners to be in a situation where they buy a property and then I survey it for them and they realize there are problems later. And that's the other thing I do want to encourage people to do as well is I, I know I know Gina and Liz and other realtors, they they have an open line to me and they can ask me questions and stuff like that. And not many people do that.
Mm.
But I find that if you talk to us, you at least know what's going on with the property. One of the things I want to bring into this, one of the things I do recommend is that if you are looking for a survey, to get a survey property and mark the boundaries, try calling all the surveyors and see if they have actually done it before. Okay,
Yeah.
because most of the time we have already done it before. Maybe it was a long time ago or something. That usually makes it easier to survey again. You can hire him again, even though it's for a different client. I have records of all the surveys I've done, plus my father, and it does make it easier to reestablish the property corners. We still have to go out there and do some work, but that can hopefully decrease the amount of time needed to get a survey done. So um, that
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. 'Cause a lot of times people call me up and says, "Oh, I did the survey before." So if I did the survey before, even though I'm busy, I do try to do it again. I do try to fit it in. So that does
Yeah.
get me into trouble, but
But here's the problem. Sometimes just because you did the survey before, they think you're going to charge them half the price or give them a
right,
special discount or not charge them at all.
right,
And that's
right,
not okay.
and that happens. But I usually tell them, look, if it's I have situations where I did a survey, and then 6 months later the points were gone. And so I usually tell them that if it's more than a year, right? Yeah, Gina. If it's been more than a year, I
He's done it.
usually, yeah. If it's been more than a year, I usually have to charge him at least near full price. If I know that there's not a lot that has happened to the property, because I do drive around a lot, then I'm not going to charge him as much. But it's still better than somebody coming in and just starting from scratch.
Right.
So, and like I said, I have a lot of the uh, records, a lot of the sketches I do, and I do generally give them out if other surveyors or property owners ask for them. So um, there's a few that I'll hold back because I feel that there's some sort of issue there. But generally, most of the surveys I have, I generally provide it to people if they ask. Especially when you have neighbors. Sometimes you have a neighbor saying, "Hey, you surveyed my property next door. There's a problem with it or something." And so I usually try to say, "Here's the information we have. Let's talk about it." Pretty much what happened with Gina, where it's like a neighbor is like, "Hey, I noticed you did a survey of my property, of the next door property. Can you talk about it?" And I usually try to talk about it. So
Well, let's go in and wrap up because unfortunately we are running out of time. But Liz, maybe if you can give us like the final word about what we have to do to hopefully uh, alleviate some of the pressure and kind of like stop that backlog like Dennis was talking about and move forward so that transactions can get done in a more reasonable amount of time.
Well, I think, like as Dennis said, if his name is on the map or his dad's name is on the map, and you want to mark the points, or if you're selling property, it's always good to know where those points are. Remember the old days of the line of coconut trees no longer holds water, and your points, even though you've been there for years, you may think you keep eking into the neighbor's yard, thinking it's part of your property because the neighbor doesn't use it or there's no one living next door. But having Dennis available to mark the points, but I also recommend you put heavy markers like a pole and paint it so that no one can move that marker, or a big planter, because those caps with the markers and colors represent who surveyed the property, and that's what they look for. So even Dennis himself will look for that just to get a bearing. Is this the actual point? But he just doesn't trust it. He'll measure it just to make sure.
Well, Dennis, obviously you are a indispensable cog in this whole chain of getting real estate transactions done. So, man, thank you for your dedication, and thank you for staying true to your craft.
sure, no problem.
All right. So Liz and Gina, we'll keep up with this because I know, and we actually said that there is a shortage of surveyors. Maybe next week we'll actually tackle the topic of what we have to do to get more people in the business, because certainly it sounds like a very, very fun profession to be in, and obviously there is a lot of work. So maybe we'll tackle that next time. But thank you guys for watching so much. Have a wonderful day.